This is Hollywood. Matías Bombal with you. Roadside Attractions and Miramax offer a screen adaptation of Mitch Cullen's 2005 book, A Trick of the Mind, which features the most famous of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's characters, Sherlock Holmes. Both Cullen and Jeffrey Hatcher adapted the screenplay, and the movie is called Mr. Holmes. The story opens in 1947, and the master sleuth has retired to a life of beekeeping and solitude in a Sussex hamlet, as decrepitude and forgetfulness begin to set in. He is looked after by a housekeeper, Mrs. Monroe, played by Laura Linney, who is assisted at times by her young son, Roger. The young Roger is beguiled by the famous man and is eager to know more about him. Sir Ian McKellen brings Sherlock Holmes, in his advanced years, to the screen.
Why did you do it?
Sir?
Break into my study. My study is my sanctum sanctorum. Private place.
Before you went to Japan, I saw you writing that story. I didn't know you wrote stories.
Oh, Dr. Watson, yes, he was the writer.
Well, so I borrowed Mum's key and went into your study, and there it was.
And how much did you read?
Just where you stopped. It was a good part, too. A man comes to Baker Street, you say you've come about your wife. How could you tell? Did you do the thing?
What thing will that be?
The cane shows the marks of a dog's teeth. The wood is from an island southwest of Madeira. That thing.
And how would you tell that a man's visit was about his wife?
He wears a wedding ring?
Well, the clues are all on that page. This sentence, to be exact.
One day into the room came a young man in newly pressed, albeit inexpensive, clothes. Clothes are freshly pressed. He's a young man, though, not expensive clothes. Then his wife must press them. Men don't have the talent, and he can't afford a servant to do so.
Very good.
That's how you knew it was about the wife?
Well, no. When you're a detective and a man comes to visit you, it's usually about his wife.
The wisdom of experience. Young Roger is played by the luminous-eyed Milo Parker, in this, his third feature film. He is somewhat reminiscent of Tommy Rettig, who you may remember from Lassie or the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. These two men, at the opposite ends of the life spectrum, build a wonderful relationship which is at the very heart of this movie. The story covers more than just the period of the last days of Holmes in retirement. There are sequences showing a trip the sleuth at Liberty makes to Japan, where he's in search of prickly ash of a type that grows in Asia to assist with improving his general health and memory. There's also a second storyline that recalls, in flashback, Sherlock's last case, which sent him into retirement. All along, it is young Roger that provides the stimulation for Holmes' journey into memory, with his natural and beautiful curiosity of childhood. Little by little, Holmes starts reviewing elements of his last case with Roger.
What possible motive could that German woman have had to kill Anne? That night, I searched for something to jog my memory of the actual case. And there it was. A picture. You know, a few years ago, I could have told you everything about the woman in that photograph. Certainly, I'd recall what had become of her, whether she was victim or culprit. But that night, I couldn't remember any of it. All I knew for certain was that the case was my last, and it was why I left the profession, came down here, retired to my bees. So, I decided to write the story down on paper as it was, not as John made it. Get it right before I die.
You're not going to die.
Oh, I'm 93.
I had a great uncle who lived to be 102.
Well, then that seals my fate. What are the odds that you would know two men who would live that long?
Well, I didn't actually know him.
They have a special bond. The Sherlock Holmes of this story is constantly correcting myths that the esteemed Dr. Watson made in recounting the many cases of their wonderful adventures in deduction. It is important for him to document the details of this last case correctly, as it actually occurred, without the Dr. Watson embellishments, which we learn were numerous, from the famous Baker Street address of legend to the details of Holmes' sartorial accoutrement, as we learn in this moment from his trip to Japan.
You are very great detective.
Thank you very much.
彼はあの有名なお帽子を持参されましたか?
My mother. She wonders if you have brought your famous hat.
Oh, the dear stalker. That was an embellishment of the illustrator. I've never worn one.
And a pipe?
I prefer a cigar. I told Watson, if I ever write a story myself, it will be to correct the myriad misconceptions created by his imaginative license.
Did you write such a story?
But I'm trying to do so now.
His host in that scene was actor Zach Shukor, playing Mr. Umezake. What a treat to see such a marvelous production, rich in every detail and enhanced by a subtle and beautiful musical treatment by Carter Burwell. Burwell's reunited with both Sir Ian McKellen and director Bill Condon. They had all worked together in a movie with similar moments and moods, Gods and Monsters, in which Sir Ian played film director James Whale. In fact, I saw many similarities between this movie and that 1998 study of a brilliant man that had actually lived, not unlike the fictional Holmes in his sensitivity. This is seen in long, lingering shots in both films of the magnificent face of Sir Ian McKellen, as you see him searching for a glimpse of a memory that eludes him. In both films, there is a core relationship between two men that in any other circumstance might be an unlikely pairing. In Gods and Monsters, it is the older director James Whale and his yardman, as played by Brendan Fraser. In this movie, it is the aged Holmes and the young boy that has a similar dynamic in their relationship, a relationship in both movies that set the memories and flashbacks into motion. I particularly appreciated a scene in which we see Sherlock attending a matinee of a film adaptation of one of his solved mysteries. As he sits in the theater, he's bemused by the liberties taken in the actual screenplay in comparison to how he remembered the actual case. The incredible care and production value exercised in that scene was remarkable. The newly created vintage film you see on the theater screen is shown in the correct Academy ratio, lit in the manner of films of that era would have been lit, with delicious black and white in perfect contrast. The filmmakers added a subtle detail that may be only noticed by experts, and you really have to look hard to see it. They added static dust in just the correct and believable amount to the surface of the vintage film projected in the theater. This is the kind of dust that movie prints would pick up during projection in the era of film and appear as tiny little black, infrequently seen specks on the surface of the image, so tiny you may hardly see them at all. But they're there, and that was absolutely brilliant. The performances here were fantastic. In particular, young Master Parker and Ian McKellen. I found myself quite moved by those scenes, as I remember so clearly as a child, being also drawn to senior citizens as they had stories to tell that my contemporaries in school could never rival. I loved to listen. To me, this special bond between the principals is the most wonderful and endearing aspect of this picture, complemented by those fantastic production values we see from movies made in England. And this case, handled adroitly by a magnificent director. I deduce that you will enjoy your time at the cinema with this Mr. Holmes. The Motion Picture Association of America has given this a PG rating. This is your pal, Matías Bombal, bidding you a fond farewell.